Sometimes love isn't a choice. Sometimes it's a calling, or a command. The return of Debbie Swaggart into Donnie Swaggart's life wasn't a romantic miracle. It was a strategic move. And at the heart of this shocking reunion was not divine intervention, but the iron will and sharp mind of one woman, Frances Swaggart. For decades, Frances has been seen as the quiet force behind Jimmy Swaggart Ministries. Her calm, classic Southern persona belies the fact that this woman, now in her late 80s, allegedly orchestrated one of the most controversial personal decisions in the ministry's history. According to insiders, Frances had a mission: protect the Swaggart name at all costs. And Donnie's turbulent love life? That was becoming a liability. Debbie Swaggart had once been the safe face beside Donnie, the one who smiled at his side, raised Gabriel, and held the image of the perfect Christian wife. But after their divorce, the ministry had to work overtime to explain away Donnie's new relationships. Questions swirled, rumors spread, and whispers echoed through the pews. What happened to Debbie? When Donnie remarried another woman, things grew more chaotic. That relationship ended in a quiet, unexplained divorce. Members who had followed the Swaggarts for decades started growing uneasy. Was this becoming a soap opera? Was the ministry shifting from salvation to scandal? That's when Frances allegedly stepped in. According to ministry insiders and former church staffers, Frances didn't just suggest Donnie reconnect with Debbie, she insisted on it. Why? Because Debbie still held the public sympathy. In the eyes of Family Worship Center's loyal following, Debbie was the one who never did anything wrong. A mother, a wife, a familiar face in an unfamiliar storm. But why would Debbie say yes? That's where the plan gets even deeper. Sources close to the family allege that Frances offered Debbie a private deal, one that included influence, access to resources, and a long-term role within the ministry. In exchange, she needed Debbie to stabilize Donnie's image. After all, a preacher with 2 divorces and a mysterious girlfriend doesn't play well on Sunday morning TV. It wasn't just about image, it was about legacy. With Jimmy aging, the future of the ministry rested on the next generation. That meant Donnie. And Donnie couldn't appear unmoored or reckless. He needed someone beside him who made him look grounded, predictable, trusted. Debbie fit that role perfectly. And so, quietly and without fanfare, Donnie and Debbie were remarried. But not because of rekindled love, because of damage control. Frances, sources claim, pulled every string behind the scenes. She leaned on loyalty, she called in favors, and she knew that, above all else, ministry success depends not just on preaching, but on perception. At first, the move seemed brilliant. The congregation sighed with relief. Gabriel, their only son, even spoke positively about the reunion during one of his sermons. It felt like a family healed. But beneath the surface, the cracks were already forming again. Privately, Donnie wasn't happy. According to those close to him, he felt forced into the decision. "I did it for the ministry," one source quoted him as saying, "but it wasn't what my heart wanted." Debbie too reportedly grew cold after the cameras were off. This wasn't love, this was politics. The marriage didn't last. Within months, whispers started again. They weren't attending events together. Debbie was absent from certain televised services. Eventually it was confirmed. Donnie and Debbie had separated once more. This time, it was different. No public statements, no explanations, no apologies. But behind the scenes, Frances was furious. One former JSM employee shared, "Frances felt betrayed. She had done everything to clean up Donnie's mess, and he ruined it again." What followed was a storm of internal ministry meetings, board reshuffles, and even a temporary reduction in Donnie's on-camera appearances. Rumors swirled that Frances even considered removing Donnie from preaching duties altogether, not permanently, but long enough to cool things off. But there was a problem. Gabriel. The future of Jimmy Swaggart Ministries wasn't Donnie anymore, it was Gabe, and Gabe's loyalty was torn. Gabriel had always loved his mother, Debbie, but he also respected Frances's authority and feared her wrath. When Donnie and Debbie's second marriage fell apart, Gabriel allegedly pulled away emotionally. For a brief period, he was preaching more than usual, and spending less time with his father off-camera. People noticed. The family that once symbolized unity had split down in visible lines: Frances versus Donnie, Debbie versus JSM. Gabriel caught in the crossfire. Through it all, Frances maintained her stoic appearance on Frances and Friends, but some noticed a change. She was colder, less patient, more direct. Some say she was simply tired of trying to control a storm she could no longer predict. The public was left confused. The ministry made no official announcements. Donnie continued preaching, smiling, praising the Lord. But the man behind the pulpit was, according to many, a broken version of himself. In the months that followed, tensions reportedly exploded behind the scenes. Donnie wanted out of the expectations, the family control, and perhaps even the ministry. Frances, meanwhile, was scrambling to hold the image together, but it was falling apart. And all of it, according to those who worked closest to them, traced back to one moment, when Frances Swaggart convinced her son to remarry Debbie, not out of love, but to protect the brand. Was Frances wrong? Or was she simply doing what she thought was necessary to preserve the legacy of a ministry that had already survived scandal, lawsuits, and financial collapse? Some say Frances is a villain, others say she's a visionary, a matriarch who did what she had to do. But here's what no one can deny. The second marriage between Donnie and Debbie wasn't about second chances. It was about saving face. And when it failed, it cracked the foundation of trust inside JSM, a foundation that may never fully recover. Now, Donnie lives in near seclusion, rarely posting online. Debbie has retreated entirely from the spotlight. Frances continues her broadcasts, business as usual. But beneath the surface, everything's changed. Former churchgoers have left. Some long-time donors stopped giving. And staff turnover at Family Worship Center has been at an all-time high. Some believe a quiet rebellion is happening within the ranks, not just against Donnie, but against the control Frances allegedly wields. And where is Gabriel? He's walking a tightrope, trying to honor his grandmother, love his father, and defend his mother, all while leading a global ministry that's never been more divided. The question now isn't why did Donnie choose Debbie again? That answer is clear. He didn't. Frances did. The real question is, can the ministry survive another one of Frances Swaggart's plans? Because this time, the consequences weren't just emotional. They were spiritual, financial, and permanent. Stay tuned, because if the rumors are true, another bombshell is coming, and this one could change the future of the Swaggart empire forever. When Frances Swaggart pulled the strings to reunite Donnie with Debbie, she underestimated one thing: the emotional toll it would take on everyone involved. From the outside, the marriage seemed like a fairy tale reunion. The Christian audience, especially older conservative viewers, clung to the idea of redemption. They believed God had healed what was broken, but internally things were already unraveling. Donnie, always seen as the loyal son and obedient preacher, was now being controlled by something other than faith, the fear of disappointing his mother. "He looks tired," said one church member, who had been attending Family Worship Center for 18 years, not just physically, but spiritually. Like a man stuck in a story someone else was writing for him. Privately, Donnie began to feel suffocated. This wasn't the young man who once preached with fire and energy in the 1990s. This was a haunted version of that man, confused, conflicted, and carrying the weight of expectations that weren't his own. Debbie too reportedly began expressing regret. Those close to her say she felt used, like a piece in a public relations strategy, not a loved wife. "She didn't return to be part of a show," said one anonymous source. "She returned because she believed there was genuine hope." But it quickly became clear this was never about love. Behind closed doors, tensions began to rise. Arguments became frequent. Donnie would leave early from services. Debbie stopped attending altogether. And Frances? She continued hosting her program Frances and Friends, with a painted-on smile that no longer felt convincing.